I'm honestly, I was really surprised at how many were going to attend because of the rain. So thank you for being here. Thank you. It is hard to talk about longevity in this way when you talk about it from an aging perspective. So what I've done is I've done my best to break down some of the science for you into bite-sized little pieces that we all can relate to and we all can understand. The way that this series in particular is set up is you're going to hear me talk for maybe 20, 25 minutes. And then I stop talking so that I can hear from you and we can, collaborate, ask questions, get into a conversation. It's really an offering to the community for everybody to just learn, absorb, be present, and then be able to ask. So I encourage you to either take notes, or if you think of questions along the way, there's also an opportunity for that as well. This is the second of our longevity learning series. And the first one last Wednesday, what I loved about it was everybody was excited about mitochondria. Everybody was excited about energizing their cells. And I think it even inspired me to also take advantage of all the things that we have at LoveLife, including the recovery modalities that attract so many people because of how helpful it is when it comes to that. You'll see that what we have coming up next is a Women's Health Vital Strategy session, Menopause 3.0, Redefining Midlife. And particularly, I think these last ones are quite important. You're going to find some people who really want to do hormone replacement therapy. They have questions about it. They don't know if it applies to them. And we're not talking about just women. We're talking about women and men. And so it's an opportunity for us to have a conversation about lots of things that are related to hormone health. Then we have pain, melatonin, vitamin D, and sleep. And we're stopping at March 19th with gut health. And then we will resume with more series. So the more that you're looking for this kind of information, the more that our team members and our other physician, our other lead physician, and also our experts will come up and also give us some more education that we all are looking for. So cracking the aging code. Here's a disclaimer. This is, of course, just for informational purposes. You always want to talk to your doctor about anything that you hear tonight. And the topic is understanding the hallmarks of aging. What I found so difficult about this is nobody really knew how we should talk about how we age. And of course, there were researchers that put some things together to help us understand this better. And in 2013, there were specific scientists that thoroughly identified key processes of aging. And when you look in PubMed and you look at the research, those same processes that still apply today were cited, I think, 20,000 times, which means that as they were continuing to evolve and learn about aging, they also expanded on what that knowledge base was like. So this is my definition, right? Aging, it's a natural process, but how we age is influenced by many, many factors. And those 12 key biological processes weren't always 12. Back in 2013, it started as just 9. And then, of course, more recently, they've continued to expand on these different hallmarks of aging. And now there are 12, and I bet you there's even more. So when I think about the hallmarks of aging, I've put them into different categories. And I want to recognize it's not just about getting older, it's about how well your cells work over a long period of time. And so when we think of what the hallmarks of aging are, it is the biological changes that cause our bodies to slow down, that cause our bodies to become less efficient, and eventually this is where the age-related diseases also come in. The striking statistic that we see today is that chronic disease affects 60% of the population, 60% of the people in this room, and probably more, likely more. We do know that from an aging perspective, most people have, 60% have one chronic disease, and 40% of those people have 2. So that just goes to show you that when we think about diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and how prevalent these things are, it's important for us to understand the processes. And I'm glad you're here so that I can at least help you understand that a bit better. Now, when you break down the hallmarks of aging, there's 3 different kinds. And I'll show you how they're organized visually so you can understand that. The primary hallmarks, we think about root causes. Just like in functional medicine, which is always about root cause medicine, there are certain hallmarks that are very, very specific to literal root cause. And then there's stress. stress-related responses. And there's a few different hallmarks that are dedicated to that specifically. And then you can see the integrative hallmarks, the final effects of aging that affect the whole body. So holistic, think holistic. And when you understand these hallmarks, you'll see some running themes. I've put a couple examples for you on a few different things that almost like a touch of what you can do to help support your body, to help support a specific aging hallmark. Now, what you see here is the very new version of the hallmarks of aging. And a long time ago, this is the way that they were looking at it. And so what we're going to do today as part of the conversation is to break down every single one of them, because holistically, that's how we're thinking about the body. It's not just about each individual hallmark. It's about, as a whole, what is this doing to us as individuals? And that is what's also causing us to age. Lots of issues with every single one of these. And so that's why we're going to dive into that today. So when you look at all 12, when I looked at all 12 and did research on all 12, I saw a bunch of big words. Not everybody understands all the big words. And even for me, when I'm thinking about it, I'm putting my doctor hat on, I want to find ways for people to understand this. And we can't always talk about genomic instability and telomere attrition and altered intercellular communications and cellular senescence. So what I've done is I put in parentheses some easier terms for all of us to relate to and all of us to understand, and the purpose of today is to break down these hallmarks. So let's start with the first one. The first one is damaging your DNA. And when you break it down, we know that DNA is the blueprint for every function in our bodies. And over time, our DNA has damage, and because of that damage, unfortunately, this is where, again, we have chronic disease, we have inflammation, and we have problems. So when the DNA damage starts to build up, this is what causes our cells not to work well. It all comes down to how well the cells can work. And just like we talked about last Wednesday, we're trying to energize our cells to be able to work more efficiently. And this is just one tick on the reasons why our cells don't work so well. So if the DNA is damaged, this is also affecting the metabolic processes that take place. So what can we do when it comes to this particular hallmark? Just a few examples, bite-sized pieces. I like to think of the antioxidant-rich foods as being so valuable and important for that. You can see it mentions limiting exposures to pollutants and toxins. That's so hard for all of us these days, right? It's really hard to be able to avoid everything, but we do what we can. Which means we do what we can with clean water, we do what we can with toxins that we're exposed to, with pollution, with environmental toxins. I think about the air quality in my home and trying to make sure that I have a really good air filter to support that, especially in the rooms where you sleep, where you're spending a majority of your time. And then I also think about all of the products when I think of toxins, because when you look at what we put on our bodies, every day, people are putting hundreds of chemicals on your bodies, and not all of those chemicals are good for you. So think about the skincare creams, the toothpaste, nail polish, makeup, lots of things for women especially. I think they're putting on 5 times more than men. Nevertheless, it's important to think about what these toxins are, learn about them, and try to avoid as much as you can for what you can. The last thing you see here, it says prioritizing deep sleep for cellular repair. It doesn't say light sleep, which a lot of people, unfortunately, that's what we're experiencing. We're experiencing a lot of light sleep. And many people are even using wearables. And with the wearables, they're also able to help identify if their bodies are actually getting the most restful sleep that they can. Rule of thumb for me, it's not just about how well I wake up and feel, it's about how I feel throughout the day. If I wake up and I feel okay and alert, I'm thinking about my energy throughout the day. And from an energetic standpoint, we should be able to not have these afternoon slumps, not have periods of time where after your lunchtime meal, you feel like you're going to fall over because lunch was too energetically demanding on you. And we have to take inventory of that. The next one is telomere attrition. So you can see I put shortened telomeres. So basically, what's a telomere? A telomere is basically the cap on top of a shoelace. That's the way that I visualize it. So if that DNA that we talked about in hallmark number 1 is unfortunately unraveling because it's exposed to those environmental toxins or your body's creating inflammation, you need something to put a cap on that to help stop that from happening. And that's what telomeres are. They're like these protective caps that really sit on the top of the DNA. Now, what happens over time is that each time your cells divide, the telomeres get shorter. And it says there, until the cell can no longer function properly. So we don't want short telomeres. We want to preserve the ends of the shoelaces on top of our DNA as much as possible. And how can we do that? What are some ways that helps to support making sure that the DNA cannot unravel? Here you see we're talking about meditation, we're talking about breath work, we're talking about stress management. We know that exercise probably has more than 200, 300 different ways it helps our bodies physiologically, and this happens to be one. So every time you're working out, whether it's strength training, cardiovascular, doing some high-intensity interval training, whatever it is, know that you're helping to support reversing aging in your body. We have a few different ways that we love to do that here at LoveLife, and for those of you that haven't seen our facility, when you do the tour, that's going to be part of it, is taking a look at all the different modalities that we have that really do support that. Now at the bottom, you also see it mentions a diet rich in omega-3s. So I like to think of omega-3s as being very, very anti-inflammatory in a world that's full of a lot of inflammation already. So our diet, generally speaking, we have a high amount of inflammatory foods that we're taking in, and we need some additional support. I mentioned to you last Wednesday, I'm a cancer survivor from my early 30s. I was using a lot of omega-3s to support my healing journey, to support my immune system. And when I say a lot, it wasn't just about how much I was taking from a supplement perspective, it was making sure that I was eating omega-3 rich foods. That meant wild fish, also including nuts and also including seeds and so much more. Other things even like avocado also have a lot of support there as well. Ooh. Next one is epigenetics. So now we're looking at the way that your genes are expressed. My very first time learning about epigenetics actually happened in a podcast. And at the very end, the podcast host stumped me. And she was like, you know, thank you so much. Really loved having you. Now I want to talk about epigenetics. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. All I know is that, and again, you're on the spot, so you can't really, you just don't know what to say. So one thing I told her was, I know that the environment that I'm living in is going to change the expression of my genes, how my body presents itself. And that's a basic definition of epigenetics, okay? So your genes are not your destiny. You hear that a lot. It mentions that your lifestyle affects which genes you turn on or turn off. And over time, the environmental factors like how you eat, what kind of stress is on your body, what kind of environmental toxins you're exposed to, that's what can press on the bad, dangerous genes. Equally enough, if we engage in regular exercise and restored sleep, and we're focusing on our stress, you are turning all of that off. And you're focusing on the things that are going to upregulate the good parts. So when you look at genes and gene expression, this is number 3 on the hallmarks of aging. And our goal is to keep those healthy genes actually turned on, whereas we don't want the harmful genes to be activated in our body. Because when harmful genes are activated, it's going to contribute to disease states, inflammation, and damage, etc. So here's what we can do. And this is a very short list, right? When you think about it, we're only on hallmark number 3. This is a really short list. But I wanted to put some bite-sized pieces of information in there. And you can see that processed foods and excessive alcohol is contributing to inflammation, which changes the expression of your genes. What you'll see on your chairs is some more information on anti-inflammatory foods. I wanted to make sure that you took something home that had some information that was also relevant, where you can take inventory of what you're eating and make sure that you're increasing the foods that are very much anti-inflammatory. Protein misfolding. This is a tongue twister, loss of proteostasis. and protein misfolding. We know that proteins are the building blocks of our bodies. We know that. But over time, when the proteins get damaged, they start to fold, and when they start to accumulate, again, causing more disease in the body. So, unfortunately, when these cells become clogged, once again, they don't function well. It'll affect your metabolism, it'll create inflammatory responses, etc. So remember, proteins are the building blocks of my body, and if they don't fold properly, yet another hallmark of aging. So here's what helps with this specifically. We know that fasting is very important to support this particular hallmark of aging, but it's not for everybody. Okay, I talked about that in the first one. I mentioned that it's important to, if you're gonna fast, talk to your doctor, talk to your registered dietitian, talk to your health coach about it, because there's a way to do it safely for your body. And for some people who engage in too much fasting, it's got its own effects. It can create inflammatory response in your body, and that's the same response that you were trying to avoid. But instead, you thought the fasting was gonna be helpful. So this is why it's always important to make sure that you're talking to your healthcare provider about it. You can see that exercise is coming up again, so it's come up a few times now, and then we're back to sleep. So the more restored sleep that you can get, the better it can be in terms of these hallmarks of aging so that we can really support you. More big words, deregulated nutrient sensing. What we know is that your body has these sensors for nutrients all over the body that help regulate your metabolism. And I also like to think of I love hormones, hormone health, so I always like to think of where else are we gonna find nutrient sensors in layman's terms. We know that our nutrients are getting absorbed through a gastrointestinal tract. We also know that the thyroid gland that sits here in your neck is also important for metabolism and absorption of nutrients. If we can't get this right in terms of how your body is taking in nutrients, we know that it's going to contribute to weight gain, to problems with your blood sugar, and then your metabolism is also going to slow down. It also mentions what happens. The body stores more fat and burns less energy. We don't want that. We also know that the blood sugar regulation will decline as we get older, so this can increase our risk of diabetes. And for many people, blood sugar regulation is a real problem, not even just for the diabetic population, even for the pre-diabetic population or even the pre-diabetic population. So it's certainly a topic, a hot topic that at some point we're probably going to want to talk about it and have a presentation on that specifically. So what can we do for this one? Eating balanced meals, making sure that the meals have optimal amounts of protein for what your body needs, making sure that you're getting in those healthy fats like those omega-3s that I mentioned earlier, and increasing fiber. I always think of fiber, all the different kinds, as being fertilizer for the lawn of your digestive tract. And the more fiber you take in, you are literally giving your gut microbes lots of fertilizer so that everything can populate and grow well. And then the last thing on there, you see strength training to boost insulin sensitivity. We know it's very helpful. I don't need to spend a lot of time on this one. We talked about it at length in our last presentation, but we know that when your body doesn't have good energy inside every single cell, it reflects on the tissues. It then reflects on the organs, and then it reflects on the organ systems, and it becomes this vicious cycle of cells not working well and creating more problems like the chronic diseases that we talked about earlier. So what happens when the engine inside our cells don't work as well? We don't have enough energy. Your battery is low. And for a lot of people, that battery is low all day, over multiple days. And it does present itself as fatigue and brain fog and poor sleep and inflammation and chronic disease. It just becomes a vicious cycle. So this is also a very important one. You can see I put a couple things here. And we also had the newsletter that went out that talked about all of the nutrients that are supportive for mitochondrial health. So if we didn't receive that, and that's something that you want to have, we did talk about that one at length, and there was also some information similar to what's on your chairs that goes into details about all of the nutrients that are helpful to support the engine inside your cells. And once again, you see sleep. If we go home with anything today at night, like just remind yourself that the more restorative, restful sleep you get, you're helping to support reversing any of these problems with the hallmarks of aging. The next one is zombie cells. So another big word, cellular senescence. What are zombie cells? Easy way to think about it, these are cells that are old, that are damaged, that are just hanging around. And when cells that are damaged hang around your body, it creates inflammation. And what does inflammation do? It speeds up the aging process. So ideally, our body should create these cells, we should use them for function, and then those cells should be dying because then your body makes more cells. And usually that happens every 90 days. So that's the life cycle of different kinds of cells, is approximately that. But when you have some hanging around, creates more inflammation. Another thing that I think of that can be helpful, you see a trend here. A lot of the same things that are helping with all of the hallmarks of aging, anti-inflammatory foods, regular exercise to help support how those cells renew themselves. And then there is a mention of fasting. And then there are certain supplements that can also be helpful for this one as well. You hear a lot about stem cells in the world of longevity. And stem cells, what they do is they keep your tissues young. And they keep your body continuing to regenerate more and more of these nice healthy cells. But over time, if our body can't continue that sped up process, it unfortunately reduces your body's ability to heal. So some people are a lot slower to recover from injuries. And if you go back, has anybody ever had like a hip replacement or a knee issue or any sort of knee surgeries or anything like that? Because when my brother had his knee issue, I noticed that he had it twice. When he was 20 and he had a knee issue, meniscal repair, that one in particular bounced back right away. But you'll notice that when people are older, they don't bounce back right away as quickly when it comes to any sort of surgical things. And so the body itself does need some additional support to help recover and also help heal. More of a theme, prioritizing sleep, managing your stress, and eating a nutrient-dense diet that's packed with those anti-inflammatory foods. And then you see resistance training, which we've seen a few more times already. Altered intercellular communication. We know that all of the cells throughout your body are always communicating through each other with all different kinds of signals. I love this because it's fascinating for me in the world of hormone health. And when it comes to hormones, people always think of certain outputs and certain cycles within the body as what controls hormone health. But I'll tell you a secret, it's not just what's happening here from the brain to the ovaries, or from the brain to the testes, or from the brain to the thyroid. It's actually the universe and how well you sleep and get those initial signals to your brain. So back again to sleep, I can't reinforce it enough. It's so important to be able to get the restorative sleep you need, clear out all the bad dead cells that you don't need, and focus on how your brain is going to then run the body throughout each day. And here you're gonna see the gut health support, the probiotics, and then the fertilizer again. Fertilizer is that fiber. You also see that it says prioritizing social connections and mental well-being. When you're around the right people, you ever notice how your energy shifts? When you see a girlfriend or you see a family member that you haven't seen for a while, your energy changes. And so some people don't stop to think that that could be something that helps to reverse the aging process, but it does. Community does. And even as we talk to each other and sit in this space, in this room, and we're all present, that also does as well. This next one is cellular cleanup failure. And this is another big word that you'll often see in the longevity space. It talks about autophagy. I like to think of autophagy as your dishwasher. And ideally, the body just wants a nice recycling system to help clean out things. And that's what autophagy really means. It's your body's recycling system. Gets rid of old, damaged things. It's trying to help make way for new things. So it's kind of like cleaning the dishes. And then you can see that what can help with that, forms of fasting like time-restricted eating or even intermittent fasting. This was a big one for me when it came to cancer healing. I needed to engage in the time-restricted eating pattern, and I like to call it chrononutrition because I would eat, and I still do. You eat during the daylight, and then after the sun goes down, the body wasn't meant to eat big meals. It was meant to produce melatonin. It was meant to relax. It was meant to prepare for deep, restored sleep. So whenever we do have these large meals late at night, the brain is then saying, oh, wow, now I need to focus on digesting all this food instead of wanting to support sleep. So from a cellular standpoint, if I'm thinking of how I can protect my body from cancer reoccurring again, the goal is to make sure that I also align with eating during daylight and as much as possible refraining from eating these large, heavy meals at night, because I know that my body wants to rest. That's ultimately the goal. This word chronic inflammation. So this word inflammaging, I believe this was part of Carlos Franceschi back in 2006. That's where he coined the term. And we know that virtually all disease states are due to some form of inflammation. And so to me, this is a big one. And this is kind of permeates through all of these other 10 hallmarks of aging. You saw that some of the ways to support it were anti-inflammatory foods, right? Even omega-3s, more anti-inflammatory foods. We also know that stress management is also difficult for a lot of people who are under a lot of stress. And it's not just emotional stress or work stress. It's also stress that's just created from all the inflammation that's going on inside of our bodies. So this is yet another one of the heavy hitters, the more popular ones when you think of the hallmarks of aging. One of my favorites, for many reasons, dysbiosis and gut imbalances. So dysbiosis is a big word for gut imbalance. And we know that there are millions of bacteria that live and reside in the ecosystem of your digestive tract. And we also know that that bacteria is responsible for a lot. It's responsible for communicating signals to your brain. It's responsible for your immune system. It's also responsible for clearing things out when it should. So when you don't have a nice, steady balance of the bacteria that's in your gut, this is also yet one of the more recent hallmarks of aging. The funny thing is, I don't know if I told you guys this story yet, but I'll say it because there's some new people. But when I was post-cancer and I was learning about functional and integrative medicine, I wanted to understand if any of the data was going to be helpful for me, just so that I know. And I wasn't somebody who had any issues with bloating, gas, pain, or burping. Didn't have any of that. But yet I developed cancer and I was only 33. And since I know that the immune system, a portion of that immune system and how it signals other cells comes from the digestive tract, I did a stool test. And part of that stool test was me understanding, okay, let's take a look at the bacterial components. Let's look at the ecosystem to see if there's problems. I thought it was going to come back stellar, so much so that I told my husband, let's do this together. So he puts his stool in the little tubes and mails it off, and so did I. And then he says, you know what, you think you don't have any symptoms, but you never know, and we're interested in data. We want to learn. So I used it as an opportunity to learn about my own body. When the results came back, Charles' gut was amazing. He had a nice ecosystem of the good and bad bacteria. There was no signs of inflammation. There was no issues with any parasites. And I think at the time, one of the reports said 90%, your score was 90% because they were scoring it by 0 to 100. So then I opened up my results. Remember, no bloating, gas, pain, or burping, nothing like that. But when I opened up my results, my score was 10%. And so for me, I was thinking, how is it that Charles has such an incredible gut, and then there's my body who has such a horrible one? And even though I didn't have bloating, gas, pain, burping, or any problems with bowel movements, I did have a weakened immune system, so much so that I put my body into a state where the foundation was hospitable to cancer. So part of my very, very early days of learning how to heal my body was to support with nourishing foods and a gut healing protocol that did have different types of supplements to help get me there. And to this day, I still do gut tests every couple of years because I'm interested in the data. And I also know that our digestive tract and the bacteria that live there are always evolving. And so as we recognize that, as we age, there's always going to be something going on that needs support. And that's why I eat the imagining foods. That's why we drink clean water. That's why we focus on the stress. And that's why we try to decrease the inflammation as much as we can. Ooh, I'm going backwards. Let's see if I can get this to work. The next one is what we do at LoveLife. This is just a collage. And what I love about it is that it highlights a lot of the different pieces of things that we really celebrate at LoveLife. We want our patients to understand the root cause of why they're sick. So when it comes to seeing our doctors like myself and Dr. Anna, that's ultimately the goal. It is not a top-down relationship, it's a collaboration. It's learning about your body in a way that's going to help you then be motivated to make the changes that you know that we might need to make. We also talk about nourishing foods. So at LoveLife, we were very thoughtful and very strategic about everything, including the ingredients of everything that we have in our cafe. And so we've created variety there. People can also add in different proteins, but down to the details of every ingredient that's in our smoothies, there's so many powerful antioxidants, polyphenols, lots of nutrients in there, and it was done with purpose. When I look at the gym, we have a pretty incredible gym where patients also feel as though there's an aspect of personalization to it. How many of you play pickleball? Ooh, big hand up right there. Yeah. And so, as we continue to build community, there's pickleball socials, there's gatherings for people to learn, there's opportunities for us to just pick it up if it's something that you're interested in. I also think that that's a really great form of exercise, and our founder, John Mackey, and also Betsy, our president, they love pickleball. And that's why we have 3 right here at LoveLife. So at LoveLife, we do take this whole person approach to longevity. And you can see that there's a few things that I've grouped together that I would think are our main priorities. We talk about prioritizing how you rest and how you recover, including how you recover from when you're working out. That's why we have a suite of so many different tools to support that. We talk about the nourishing food. Our patients have access to a registered dietitian and even a health coach to help them, because what you eat and why you eat it, and even the timing of when you eat it, all of that is important. And so for some people, it's overwhelming and it's nuanced, and that's why they need some additional support to give them the unique insight. The next thing is about movement and recovery, and they do go hand in hand, and one is not more important than the other. They're both equally important. I mentioned reducing toxins, and I gave you some examples of some things where we need to check ourselves. Community and purpose. I think that who we call family and who we think of as community and, who our relationships are with, just be around the people that give you that energy that I was telling you about, where you see them and you smile and it makes you feel really good. And when I think of hallmarks of health instead of hallmarks of aging, these are the first things that came to mind with me. Optimizing your sleep, nourishing your body with the foods you need, making sure that you're getting outside and getting that natural light. We talked about last week how 90% of us are inside majority of the day and how problematic that is, that we're not outside getting natural light and getting grounded to the earth. How important exercise is, especially as we age. We lose our muscle mass, and it's an important step that most people aren't taking. But I think a lot of the people here and the members that are here are actually taking that step. I like this one, take inventory of your symptoms. When I was sick, I always chalked up my fatigue to working really hard. I was a concierge doctor in Miami, so I thought, 20 patients a day, 5 days a week, weekends, I got this, I can do this. Meanwhile, my body was breaking down on the inside. And I was 5 years into that career as a concierge doctor in Miami, seeing people at all hours of the day, admitting to the hospital, and it wasn't serving me. So it was also important for me to take inventory of my symptoms, take inventory of my disease state, and recognize that I can't keep living that way if I wanted to have any sort of meaningful change. The other one that I like is protecting your energy. Not that I don't love all of these, but protecting your energy, because we're in a culture of hustle and saying yes to everything. So setting your boundaries and making sure that you give yourself time and space to just be, that is super important. You can see in the middle, I mentioned learning more about your body with data. I can't tell you how many patients that come to see myself and Dr. Anna when we ask, when was the last time you've seen a doctor? For some people, it's 5 years, it's 10 years, it's longer. which means they're not keeping up with checkups, they're not checking their blood, we don't understand what's going on. And unfortunately, when you don't know and you don't have the data, you don't feel empowered, you feel scared and fearful. And so it's really important for us to understand at least that part of things in addition to other things. I also like the eating with intention. So whenever I eat, and I didn't always do this, but more recently I did because I came across a chef, her name was Chef Perla, and at one of the retreats, she had a beautiful spread of this incredible food, and when you looked at it, you were just so inspired to eat it. And so when we sat down at the table, she did an activation, and she always said, it's so important for you to activate your meals. Put the proper intention to what you eat, so that when you pause to eat, you're not scrolling through your phone, watching the TV, engaging in a heated conversation. Plus there's a ton of noise in the background. And by the way, it's 10 p.m. at night, right? So whenever you put food in your body, just make sure that you say a little prayer, say some grace for it, and eat with intention because you are activating that food and the way that it goes down. And then I guess the last one I'll point out that I do really love is the rest. I think a lot of people, when we think of rest, it means something different for everybody. You know, some people, their version of rest is literally sitting on a couch and popping on a TV show. Others, rest, at least for me these days, is spending time with my son, my 6-month-old son. And my favorite time is the middle of the night when he's sleeping and I'm literally just holding him and resting. And so it's important to remind yourself to pause and rest because we live in a world and a culture where everything is so sped up. The next one that I'm going to tell you about is, in general, when you think of those hallmarks of aging, there were themes. The anti-inflammatory foods, which you have on the handouts. We talked about that. The antioxidant-rich foods, there's more information about that. The probiotic foods, the prebiotic foods, the fiber. Remember, that's the fertilizer that helps to support you. How well you sleep, whether or not you're engaging in regular exercise. Are you resting and recovering as much as you need to? But all of those things help to support every single aging process there is because we're really trying to avoid all of those chronic diseases that are plaguing 60% of the population or more. So our next talk is going to be on women's health vital strategies. And I think what's interesting about that one is I'm going to make sure that we cover women's health at every age because that changes over time. And because I love hormones, we're going to do it from a hormonal lens. The reason why I love hormones so much is because there are chemical connections in the body that elicit this response. But as we age, there are a lot of rhythmic changes. And for younger people, it's not so obvious, but as we get older, 20s, 30s, 40s, it becomes much more obvious. So I think when we do next Wednesday on women's health vital strategies, I'm going to be putting the hormone health lens on, and that's how we're going to engage in that conversation. I think the hormone replacement therapy one is a big one because a lot of people have mixed information about hormones. And for some people, it doesn't apply at all. And for others, it absolutely applies. And they could get so much relief from it. So this is just, I think the QR code is there and that works as well. A lot of the signups for these have continued to just sell out. So we've continued to increase capacity to make sure that everybody is able to attend and support. And then once we finish off the longevity learning series, as I mentioned earlier, the rest of our team members are also going to be continuing on the series. We'll pass the baton so that we can also hear from everybody at LoveLife, including our other physicians and also the other experts. Now I'm going to take a drink and stop talking so we can have conversation, okay? No need to clap. Yeah. Whew.